Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Hey everybody, Tom Dutta like butter. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. You know what? The show is just growing, and I got to say thank you because of you. We are booked out at least 3 months every week. I can't keep up with it. And we actually have guests on the wait list. And this thing is just taken off. We are now on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and Rumble, which is a great new platform. And so if you're on there and you can see the chat box, you can comment or put a question. I'll see it in studio. We might put it on the screen, have some fun with you. We just really appreciate the engagement if you're out there. This will be released in the future as an international podcast everywhere, 19 countries now, and also it'll be a YouTube premiere video. So stay tuned for that, but also know that right after we finish the live, it'll stay where it is on the feed. You can go back and watch it and enjoy Mr. Nick, who we're going to bring on in a minute. Now, a lot of cool things happen when I'm in the studio here. This is my happy place, and I get a lot of books sent to me. You see back there, these are all guests who've come through the show. So I said to Nick Marshall, I'm going to tell you about, so, hey, man, your book is so awesome. Let me hold up the cover. I mean, what a good-looking guy. And so I got this book in the mail from him. He even signed it. I mean, how nice is that? So I'm going to introduce you to Nick by reading the back cover there. Hi to our live people there who have just dropped in. I see you on the screen here, your little numbers, so that's fantastic. Stay right till the end. Before I bring Nick Marshall on the screen, he is a New York City-based writer, actor, director, and producer. He studied acting at the William Esper Studio. In collaboration with fellow graduates, he formed the Collective New York, a not-for-profit theater and film company, under which he continues to develop numerous productions for the screen and stage. While attempting to afford to live in Manhattan, he began working at some of New York City's hottest clubs, such as Avenue, the Darby, 10AK, and Up and Down. He finished his nightlife career as a brand ambassador for the Butter Group. Hey, Tom Dutta Butter. And traveling across the world, working pop-up events. He's currently in pre-production for his first directorial feature, A Long Road, based on his experience as an ex-convict trying to reintegrate into society, and a scripted series based on his experience in a New Jersey state prison. This book, Try It Again, everyone, is fabulous, and you're going to hear more about it. So let's bring him on the screen here. Hey, welcome to the show, Nick Marshall.
How you doing, Tom? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you over there in New York, man. I was just saying to you off screen in the green room that look at the contrast in this picture. That stud there with the hair shaved back and then the hair now. What's up with that? Just tell us what's up with the longer hair. Is that your look now?
You know, I just had, you know, how some people during COVID just grew everything out or shaved it all off. I went in this post-writing book world where I was like, I'm just going to let my hair grow and see what happens. I've always had this slight obsession with my hair, and it was very difficult for me over the years to allow it to be as free as it is now and naturally curly and do what it does. I've always wanted to style it, and it never really fit me. And then I just tried this, and I said, maybe it's my age and quote unquote potential wisdom that allows me to just be me at this point, right? And not really care. And I'm kind of fighting with it. I like it.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. I mean, I was just thinking about the movie industry now and some of the actors I've seen, not to compare you, but there's a few I can think about where that hair is just legendary look. So I like it a lot. Hey, listen, would you like to go into Plato's Garden and have some conversations?
Yeah, let's check out the garden, see how it goes.
All right, everybody, we're going to go into Plato's Garden, and then I'm going to put something on screen for you to look at as well. So stand by. What would it be like to go into Plato's Garden with Nick Marshall? Oh, there it is. You can see on the screen there, if you're watching us on audio, I'm going to read it. Plato's Garden. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece. And Nick, he was a founder of the Platonist school of thought and academy. from the Greek word academia. It was the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, apparently. What we're going to do today, Nick, is just have conversations, tell stories, but we're going to look at your entire life through what I call the influences of context. So 3 areas. One is macro. What was going on in the global world around Nick as he grew and shaped his public work. 2 is mezzo, what was happening in your sector that influenced your public work. And 3 is micro. They're my favorite because this is about you, the dude. Your story, and a lot of times we may go back right to childhood on some of the guests. They just go really deep. So let me take that off the screen now, and I set this up, and we'll just have some fun. So I call this the setting the scene. Your journey reads like a screenplay, Nick, from suburban New Jersey to a state prison cell, then New York City's glittering nightlife, and now to directing films and leading a theater company. So we're going to start with the moment that changed everything. From what I read about you, you were 21, facing armed robbery charges, and things were running through your mind when those cell doors first closed. So I'm going to get you into the micro now. The first 3 years, I call this the prison awakening. So 3 years behind bars at such a young age. What died in you during that time, and what was unexpectedly born?
Well, my main guidance, like my North Star, if you will, was the hope of being able to have a future when I was released. And the only quantifying asset I believe I had was while I was on bail, a professor, my attorney had said to me, "You look like a Backstreet Boy. Are they ever going to find the gun?" And I said, "No." He said, "Great, go back to college. No jury's going to believe this. We have some legs to stand on here." And I said, "Okay." And one of my professors took a liking to me, happened to be a geology professor. And he called me, held me after class, and he said, I was like, "What's going on? What'd I do?" He's like, "Nothing, actually. I'm just wondering, do you want to be a geologist?" And I started laughing. He's like, "Why are you laughing?" I was like, in the back of my head, I was like, "Because I'm going to prison." I don't know. That's one reason of many. And he's like, "Yeah, they make a lot of money. Look at me. I worked for Exxon. Now I teach for fun. I have a lot, I have a great life. Look at my Corvette, classic car." And I was like, "Oh, how nice. That's very kind of you." And I was like, "I just don't think that's for me." He goes, "Well, what is for you? You're such a bright young man." And I was like, "Thank you. I want to be a film director. I want to be a writer." He's like, "We have a great film program here." And I was like, "Yeah, I heard, but if I'm going to do it, I want to go to the best." He goes, "Well, what's the best?" I said, "NYU." I said, "All right, I'll write you a letter. Apply." So, "Really? That's very kind. Thank you." And of course, in the back of my head, I'm like, this is all nonsense talk. I went about my day, finished my classes, but then on my ride home, his voice just kind of got into me, and his voice, he was just repeating, like, here's someone who sees something in me. Maybe one of the first times in my life, someone saw something in me that I respected. And, what did I have to lose? I said. So I went home. I went onto the NYU website. I downloaded the packet. I started working on it. I wrote the essay about my experience. Not the whole truth, but elements of. And, and then I submitted it, forgot about it, got his letter, attached to it, a few days later. And that was it. Fast forward 6 months as I'm going through plea bargaining offers, 18 years, 15 years, 12 years, 10 years.
Wow.
9 years. Yeah. I mean, this is like
crazy.
I walk home one day, and I open the mail, and it's NYU insignia. I said, "All right, sit down." I open it, and I got in.
All right.
I start crying. Love those sound effects. And I just start crying, and I'm like bawling, and I call my mother. Now she's bawling, but she admitted to me later she was bawling for the opposite reason, that she knew I wasn't going to be able to attend. My father was very reticent about it and just sort of like, "Oh, congratulations." And sure enough, 3 hours later, my attorney called me. It was 6 p.m. I remember, 6:15. He goes, "Hey, Nick, do you have a moment?" And I was like, "Sure. But can I tell you something?" And he had gone to NYU, and he was like, "Wow, that is such an accomplishment. You know how big of a company? They only accept 32 people, a semester." And I was like, "Really? Wow." I'm like goosebumps, everything. He goes, "But I'm sorry to have to tell you the next portion of our conversation. And I was like, what? He goes, I think you should sit down.
Oh, man.
And he goes, your co-defendants just took a plea for 3 years with 85%. So you're going to be going to prison, because I do not advise a trial in which there are now state witnesses. And I just sort of, the next few months as I awaited my sentencing date were incredibly difficult. But to go back to your original question, I just wanted to give context.
Yeah.
North Star of Hope, it guided me to be able to look at the positives I could achieve with all this time, forced time on my hands.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing openly. I said this to you before. I think there were an email that you're a storyteller, a natural storyteller. So I want you to hold up the book. You've got this great book that you've just put out. Just hold it up and tell us the title.
Try Again, an ex-con's path from prison to prosperity.
I'm glad you had to check
on that part. I didn't write it. That was my editor, and she was like, "Well, when you look at the SEO words, and you're familiar with it,
yeah."
Right? And I was like, "Oh, do we have to have it on there?" She's like, "I really think it's good," and I was like, "Okay." So it's ironic that every time someone asks me what the title is, I'm like, "Again," and then and then I remember, there's a whole.
I'm smiling with you because, I'm a published author, and the first book you and I talked about mine, and it's that I call it the byline. I never remember it, even when I'm talking to people. So, first of all, what's with the cover? It's a striking photo of you. What if you look at that photo and that look on your face? What emotion would you tag to it? What one or two words would you tag to that?
That's interesting. It's funny you say that. They thought the same. Mysterious, serious, maybe all wrapped in one, like very, what's behind those eyes?
Yeah, no, exactly. Everybody, I'm going to hold it up again. Nick's just showed it to you. I got my own, and he actually signed it, which is wonderful. This will stay in my studio. But the interesting thing I learned from a publisher long ago is they said they rarely will accept a picture of the author for the cover. And I said, why? And this was a New York-based publisher. And they said, well, because we get crappy photographs. Yours is striking. And what's interesting is when I saw that photo, I thought badass. I thought deep thinker. Your blue eyes are striking. You've got presence. There was so much in it that I was thinking about. But then when I realized what the book was about, I went, oh my God, how did somebody who this cover, how did that guy end up in prison? So just before I move on, and Plato's here, just take us into, without giving away the whole book, take us into what exactly occurred to get you into prison, and the moment you stepped in that I'd imagine was a cement dark place or steel doors, what you felt.
Lots of those. I was a dumb kid, but I came from a very middle-class background, had everything a kid could want, played 3 sports all the time, was shuffled to and from practices by my parents, was a dean's list student without trying, but I was also the class clown because I never fit in. So I used this sense of, self-deprecating action to try and have kids like me. And unfortunately, it didn't really work, and I got bullied. And then I started gravitating to the hip hop music scene, which at that time was NWA and Public Enemy, and things that were not normal in as they are today in all forms, classes of society, so to speak. And I really took a liking to, quote unquote, a struggle, even though I had no struggle. My only struggle was avoiding bullies so I didn't get beat up. I wasn't, avoiding major things that people in the inner cities are. But with that said, there were some kids who came from inner cities whose parents were trying to get them a better life. And they were also ostracized at that time. So I took to being their friend and then mine. And most of those kids were really great and good. But as I got more immersed into elements of that culture, I met some bad apples, and I gravitated to the bad apples because at the time, the bullying had gotten really bad. I mean, I was fighting every day just to survive. running and fighting. Like I'd come home with bloody noses, fat lips. Like my mother was always concerned. My father was basically, did you win? It's fine if you have a few, because very old school, as you read in the book about my father.
So did you win?
No, I was always beat for the most part. And then I remember my grandfather had given me some savings to help buy my first car. And I was working from the age of 12 at a gas station, saving money. So by the time I was 17, I had enough to buy a small car. And I bought the car. And the first day I had my license, I pulled up to school. And sure enough, now that I had a car, not only did I have the friends that I had, but I had the bad apples gravitating me going, hey, let's go to Manhattan. Let's buy some drugs. And I was like, oh, really? They're like, yeah, we can make money. I know a spot. And I was like, money. So now that clicked. So that was my first trip. I was 17 years old, went to Ogden Ave up in the Bronx, couldn't get out of the car because I'm white. Didn't work like that. They went to the spot. They bought everything. We came back. That first day I had flipped $20 into 40. And the next day and the next day and the next day. And by the first month, I had like $1,000 and I'm 17 years old. And, this is 1996.
That's a lot of money for back then, man.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, well, how do I do this bigger? And I started to find different spots and I got robbed at one and then this happened. And like, just kind of the inner workings of starting a drug business kind of just took advantage of me.
Sure.
And eventually I started getting very concerned about the risk I was taking in and out of the George Washington Bridge every day with cameras, people being pulled over, potentially being arrested. So what I saw.
And how old are you back then? Right now, as you 17. Wow.
And I started to figure, well, now I have enough money to buy what's called weight. So I don't need small bags anymore. I can buy an ounce. I could buy half a pound if I can find it. I mean, that's how much money I'd save.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I set out to do that. And I found someone in the area, a white kid, hippie, who was growing it himself upstate and older than me. And I bought my first ounce. Very quickly, that ounce, I just kept reinvesting my money. And I got relatively big, relatively quickly. And then as I graduated high school, I started having my younger brother's friends work for me and comb the high schools in the area. While I was out in Manhattan at nightclubs, there used to be a nightclub called The Tunnel. It was a very famous nightclub owned by Peter.
Say that again. How do you spell that?
The Tunnel, T-U-N-N.
Oh, Tunnel. Got it.
And
still there? Is it still there or is no?
No, it's gone. And it was owned by a gentleman named Peter Gation, and it was like the most salacious drug den. So I started meeting real drug dealers who were dealing ketamine, ecstasy, pharmaceuticals, and weed and cocaine off the boat from at that time Amsterdam or Russia. And I basically met one who sat me down, and he used to change apartments every month. That's how this guy was. And he sat me down. He goes, look, I like your style. You talk a good game. Passes a slew of drugs, what came to be $25,000 worth of product across the table. And he goes, and I go, I don't have that kind of money. He goes, that's okay. You're going to work for me. You're going to take this back. You're going to do this. You have 2 weeks to pay me back or bring the rest of my drugs back. And if you don't,
that's crazy. I can just, God, you got courage. I'd put myself in your shoes in that moment at age 17. It's like, I just go back to The Godfather and all these movies and see the scenes of, I want my drugs back. I'm going to break your hand, by the way, before you go.
And by that time I was 18. So I had about a year of learning the lower ranks and doing some, stupid things and getting caught and, getting robbed or hurt or whatever. And then here I am. So from that moment on, I catapulted. And I started making a lot of money. But then there was a neighborhood local cop who would sit outside my parents' house for his entire 8-hour shift, just waiting to get me. And I would do everything I could to avoid, being caught. I was very cautious, very smart. And then I started dating a girl in Manhattan who was a debutante who had nothing else to do but drugs. And I got into doing my own drugs, which was the beginning of my downfall.
Yeah.
So I was doing drugs with her. The business was falling apart. And then because as I told you, I had a pretty decent crew of tough guys, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, one of which was my gunman, who always had a gun on him. And my parents had divorced at that point. So he moved into my parents' house and stayed with me. And he would be there for days alone while I was in New York. And, one time I came back and he's like, look, let's just start robbing your suppliers. We'll make a lot more money. You're always out. You're effed up half the time anyway. Your business is crashing. Why not? And I was like, great. And we started robbing the drug dealers. And I wasn't.
That's like walking in front of the barrel of a shotgun, right? I mean, the risk there is huge.
The risk was tremendous. And I thought, in my naivety and in my ego, because now I went from being bullied to being Mr. Popular with anyone who wanted to do drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who want to do drugs in high school and into college, right? So now I'm what I've always wanted to be, which was popular and cool. Only I'm doing it with an ego and for the wrong reasons and not realizing at the time. So as we started robbing these drug dealers, we started making serious money in clips. And I thought nothing was illegal about it. I really thought that the worst that would happen, since it was criminal on criminal crime, was someone come try to shoot me or beat me up or rob me. I had no idea about the law. I was that naive and stupid and egotistical. And fast forward to about a year after that, there's a lot more here, but I'll just cut to the chase. I had quit dealing drugs. I was working for my cousin. And then I get a phone call. Hey, this guy who took over your territory, he's got all the job. And we went and I took a different crew and I orchestrated a new gun, gloves, masks, a team to do this. And we went and robbed this house with 7 people in it. And that was the original crime that I was incarcerated for.
Yeah. Let me jump in there while you catch your breath. What a story. Everybody, we're here with Nick Marshall, the author of Try Again, an ex-con's path from prison to prosperity, just dropped. I've read it cover to cover. You got to get the book because Nick, in it, there's so much in it that paints this picture. And I bought the audiobook too because I love listening. It's actually crazy experience to all those out there. If you get an audiobook and you get the paperback and you listen to one while you're reading the other, it's really a wild experience. I have a bit of a cognitive issue with the concussion thing, but when I first saw that part of the book about the robbery and 7 people and whatnot, I mean, it's just I'm putting myself in the hero's journey there with you. That's crazy. And now meeting you, you just seem like a really nice, likable guy. I want to riff a bit and go back because we're still in micro, the personal part of your story. Everybody has their own story, right? So we could talk about your mom and your dad and do a Tony Robbins and say whose love did you crave the most and what did you have to do to be loved by each? I won't go there, but when I grew up, it was like my dad left at 12, was a drunk and a military guy. I was picked on too in different ways, color of my skin and all that. And so I learned through neuroscience that there's a chip on my shoulder. There's something missing. I'm seeking significance and love, and I'm finding it in the wrong places. And a lot of people I've interviewed, like you, who have ended up in bad situations, it's because we're all born golden, but something in our stories just shifts, and our brains are looking for something. So from what we heard, you found your way into this new profession, I'll call it. And I can't wait to see the movie on that one because it's just an incredible story hearing it first time. I want to just share one more thing with you. When I asked you about describe the prison, I know in the audio or in the book, I can vividly see that. I don't know if I told you in an email recently, but every 2 Fridays I go into a maximum security prison. I don't know if I told you that.
You didn't, but when you sent me those side documents that you shared, when you talked about what you were doing in regards to your father, I was like, oh, wow. I didn't realize that. That's like something I eventually want to do to give back.
So without dominating, I want to share this just for context because we're in Plato's Garden riffing here, everyone. I'm not a talking head off interviewer. But my dad, when he was at his worst drinking, he, broad cited a woman in her car, almost killed her and her child. He lost his job because of the alcoholism and all this. And he ended up a couple nights in a prison cell where the family, my brothers and I, we had to deal with that. When later in life, I decided I love my dad, I miss him, and he passed in 2018, but I wanted to do something in service. It was actually through a church that I follow online and I go to sometimes, where they started a prison ministry. So when I go into the prison, I don't actually minister the Bible or anything, even though I'm baptized Catholic and believe in Jesus. I actually sit there with guys in red jumpsuits, and we have a microphone. They read a children's book, we record it, and that goes with the actual physical book to the child. And my reason for doing it is simply because my dad's voice wasn't there when I was a kid. And in those early years, as children growing up, we want to be nurtured. For boys losing their dads, it's harder. So when I met you and read your book, that's the last thing I just want to share with you. That, man, I'm sitting literally across, and we do 4 inmates, we call them candidates, in a period of 2 hours. They come into the library. We're by ourselves with them. We're all geared up with these pull string things in case there's a problem. But I see these men, and most of them are young, in a way society doesn't see them. This is maximum security prison. And I look in their eyes and I can hold a space because I feel I understand them. And they're just guys who made mistakes, but they're wonderful souls, and they're trying to be better. And that's the part I see in them. And that's why I love your story. I'm going to get into something else I want to throw at you here. You said that this prison system doesn't rehabilitate. When you walked out, what were the barriers that no one talks about?
Oh, yeah, great question. And that's really what the book's about, right?
Yeah.
So the biggest barriers that people don't understand is that as soon as you get out, you have almost all the time, unless you max out without parole, you have a parole officer. That parole officer, must approve pre-release. Your residence must be approved, meaning I couldn't just, even if I had the means, I couldn't just rent my own apartment alone. I'd have to have someone, family member usually, or wife, girlfriend, something, take control of me. So that's number one. Number two is, as soon as you have 24 hours to report to that parole officer upon your release, then you go in and you talk to them and you sit across them, and they just look at your charge sheet. They don't look at you. So they've created a preconceived notion of you. And then you start telling them what your goals are, and they go, I don't care. Get a job.
Really?
They're like,
wow.
I don't care if you bag groceries or if you do this or if you do that. So long as you have a W-2 pay stub and you're paying taxes and you're working, 20, 30, 40 hours a week, and I don't have to chase you around or worry about where you might be or not be. And that's it. And then they go on with the, know this, curfew at 9. We'll start here. We'll see you every week. And that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Then you realize, at least I realized very quickly, there's no jobs that you can do. So say I go back to college. So number one, if I had gone back to college, I would need almost 3 years to graduate. I would have to, find a way to pay for that, right?
That's
and then
right.
I have to work at night because I have to have a job to satisfy parole, and going to college isn't a job. So that's not that. So then you add that, and then you look at, in the United States of America, all of the jobs you cannot do. You cannot trade stocks, bonds, equities, securities. You cannot hold a finance license. You cannot hold a real estate license. You cannot work from state governments, federal governments, most local municipalities. I couldn't be a garbage man in New York City. Right?
Wow. And that's just by law, right? Because of your record.
Law. That's just by the archaic laws of
really
what is off limits. I couldn't vote.
Man.
There's so many disadvantageous rules that what are your options at that point? Okay, so I will have to bag groceries. I will have to stock shelves. I will have to work at Starbucks. And then I said, no, I won't. Hospitality, especially back then, they don't do background checks.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell them where I've been. Tell them I'm new to the industry. Tell them I took some years off. Tell them I went and traveled Europe abroad. Is that a lie? Yeah, but it's more of an omission in order for them to see me for who I am in front of them and then hire me. So I had a skill. I knew how to bartend. I used that, started there. I knew how to wait tables. And then what that also allowed me is, then now that I had this, I got to go back to my parole officer and say, all right, now I'm going to go put myself through acting school because that's cheaper. I can use my paychecks to pay for that directly. I don't have to take out loans. I won't be in massive debt. And it's really one of the only avenues I have. I mean, yes, could I have gone and become an attorney and eventually, but there's still rules against that. There's certain, you can't just go take your bar after everything. There's like steps that you have to prove that you've rehabilitated. And again, I say that with quotations because it's more of like the minutia, of how to get there. Yeah. In order to ultimately take the bar legally and then pass the bar and become an attorney legally with this on your jacket, as they say, this flag of an econ.
Well, I mean, just jumping in here, I thinking about the word rehabilitation. I have no concept of that, obviously, from your point of view. But you said something earlier. I wrote it on my paper here about, you talked about the North Star of where you were seeing you wanted to go with your career, and then something about filling something out. You said not the whole truth, and that triggered when you were telling your story just now, Nick. That, I mean, how many people would you, if you have come out of a situation like prison and you have a record, how many people, even without you trying to show you rehabilitated, a good charactered person, you made them, how many people judge you right there, right? You got a record.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, it's happened before. In my first film, A Long Road, originally it was a short film that we did 10 years ago. Yeah. And that was the storyline. You go into, hey, oh, no thanks. And I have like this quick cut section where it's like, nope, oh, no. And like the difference of reactions that I've seen over the years, anytime that someone's found out, right? And that's when they've known me. So, there is a real stigma. It's unfortunate. And also this, Tom, I made mistakes, but I chose these paths.
Sure.
Right? And so many others have done the same. Right?
Yeah.
We choose which roads we go down. And there are people who are not rehabilitated, who never want to be rehabilitated and don't care. And that's just the nature of the world we live in, right? But there are people who genuinely have made mistakes and want a second or third or fourth chance. And that's one of the reasons I called the book Try Again. Because even in the 26 years since I've been free, I continue to try and fail and just keep trying.
Yeah. The thread of just addiction goes through the book too. We won't have time to get into all the details, but you've mentioned you were taking drugs, and I know from just people I've met that drugs are hard to get off. I mean, there's a process, and then alcoholism. I understand that because of my father, and some of those things can change the way your brain basically functions as well. So you had to go through all that, clean that part of your life up, come out, move into, I mean, I'm so impressed, and it's remarkable. I love you and your story, but read the book, everybody, because it's so remarkable. I think about sometimes it's probably not a fair comparison, but what you did, the mistake you made to get in prison, armed robbery, you read it, it's what it is. But there's far more heinous crimes and things out there from people who really should never come out of prison. And one of the things that was said to me when I went into the prison I was telling you about is one of the guards looked at me and said, there's a lot of people in here who shouldn't be here. And that's probably another part of the system, right?
It is. And like I tell this story, what really gets me is I was moving into like my third area of a certain prison, and I had been down, as they call it, for almost a year at that point. Yeah. And I'm packing my bunk up, and I'm kid next to me, lounging, reading a book, good-looking kid, just had an energy about him. I was like, hey, what's up? I'm your new bunk. He was like, hey, says hello, start talking. He's like, oh, everyone asks, what you down for? I'm like, oh, armed robbery. Oh, damn. And really it was played out to armed burglary, but that was the original charge. So I'll take the street cred, especially in prison, right? That stuff matters, especially when you're unaffiliated. And he looked at me and he's like, damn. I was like, what about you? And we talked about how long we had. And he goes, bag coke. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. So I was sleeping next to this kid who was African-American from an inner city, who was given a 3-year sentence for a bag of coke. And this isn't the 10th time I heard it 20th time I've heard it since that. And
Wow.
I had armed robbery with intent to distribute, all these other charges, and I was able to plead it down to 3 years with 85%, meaning it's a violent crime, so I had to do all the time. There's no chance of parole. But he was still serving a top line 3. So he'd be out in about a year and a half, maybe 3/4. But for a bag of cocaine. Yeah. Why is he sitting in prison? Why do we not have a subdivision for people who are affected by drugs and alcohol, who do things out of character or who are caught with, a certain level of product? It doesn't make sense to me. And also, some of these kids that are drug dealers, that means they have a business acumen. They could be legitimately good businessmen in society if we educated them further, give them tools how to start small businesses. Maybe we do grants or, SBA loans for people who were incarcerated for dealing drugs or some kind of, crime that's a business style crime. Because then, as a society, not only has that person truly learned and been rehabilitated, he's now a positive tax-paying employee. He's now employing people in society instead of being a drag and taking from society like so many people who come out of prison.
Wow, man, that piece about could be the business skills. It's absolutely true. If I think about it, what a perspective. Everybody, we're here with Nick Marshall, the author of the book. Hold it up there again, that great book. Try again. Little shameless plug there. I want to ask you to read the byline, An Ex-Con's Path from Prison to Prosperity. There, I helped you out. All right, thank you. Everyone, I'm going to say something about this later in terms of a review, but I'm recommending you get the book. And, author's work's not known unless you write a review, post it on goodreads.com, Amazon, where you get the book, so that the sales reps see that there's a buzz around the book. And jump into the global view. I call this macro now. A couple things I want to ask you. You lived inside the system that society believes in, but rarely takes a look inside. What's the biggest lie we tell ourselves about incarceration?
Well, I think it's about the lack of rehabilitation. I mean, the truth of incarceration is it's segregated, it's racially segregated, and it's segregated by gangs, and it's run by gangs and prison guards. And some of the prison guards are corrupt, and all of the gangs are a level of, violence and corruption. So whether they're moving drugs, whether they're, doing, performing hits of some kind, it's a really, really tough place to be. And that, very often the recidivism rate in the United States of America hovers at 66%, meaning out of every 100 people who go to prison or get involved in the system, parole or prison, 66% return and stay in the cycle, right?
Sure.
Only 33 get out and leave the cycle. And that's a staggering statistic. And when you think about what prisons are, some of them make criminals. So that's something that's really interesting.
That's very interesting to me. That's very interesting to me because going back to my experience I was talking about earlier, I have a friend who's a university professor in another country, and I'm doing a university course now. And I was telling her about this prison thing I'm doing. And I said, when I go in there, I meet these guys, and I said, my heart goes out. And I just, for the time I have with them, sometimes it's 15, 20 minutes, right? And they're reading their book, but sometimes they'll make small talk, and there's rules. We're told we're not allowed to connect to them personally. We're not allowed to say too much. We're not allowed to ask them about, why are you in here? But Nick, what starts happening is, I think because I hold a space for people, I don't judge them. I see them as love, not the mistakes they made. They open up, sometimes will tell you things. And I said to my professor, I said, I get this. I love this program because I get this one chance to just for a minute, let them feel human. And she jumped on me. She said, your job when you go in there is not to humanize them, because the minute they show weaknesses, cracks in their armor, they go out of that library back to where they're from. They're beaten, they're preyed on if they show weakness. And when I walked out of the prison that day, I went, oh my God, that's a reality. Maybe you can comment on that, but I read your book and there were things in there that were hard to read. And that's why it's a great book about you know, the treatment and the risks and just all that comes with this. So just riff on me for a minute from what I said. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. She's right in a respect. I think she was trying to protect these young men or men.
Yeah.
She's right. You can't show weakness. No matter how many times I was there, I wanted to cry. I didn't. It's something you hold in and just don't allow yourself to feel. One of the biggest things that I've pointed out to people was there was a point where I timed it from the moment I hugged my mother before I stood in front of the judge in the courtroom, before, not after, at sentencing, until the moment I hugged her in a visiting room in a state prison. For me, was like 8 months.
Wow.
And without that hug, and aside from that, there's no human physical contact.
Sure.
That's something that I think we forget, is that as humans, look, you go home every night, right? You have a daughter, you have a wife, you have friends. When you see your friends and you're leaving a bar or restaurant, you give them a pound, a hug, of this. When you see your kid, you give them a hug. When you see your wife, you give her a kiss and a hug. When you lay in bed at night and you're watching TV, someone may cuddle to you, whether it's your daughter crawling on your chest, whether it's your wife, significant other laying next to you. We as humans, we crave feeling. We crave human experience by touch. That's sensation.
Yeah.
And that you don't have in prison.
Well, let me just show you something on the back there. You see my screen, I've changed the view, and you can see there's a brain. It's a replica of a human brain back there. I'm pointing to it.
Yeah.
I call it Mr. Brain. I take him with me when I do public speaking. I bought it actually when I had my concussion, which is another story. But this leads nicely into the next part of macro, which is sort of the global influences about your story, about mental health. And I realized that from studying, especially I went into depression with my concussion and I had to get therapy, a lot of therapy, that there's chemicals like oxytocin that were released when I'm with you. I'm getting a virtual hug here. I'm seeing you. I'm feeling there's something in common. We've talked a bit virtually, but these hugs are big things. So let me just call this theme mental health and the ex-con stigma. So things like PTSD, anxiety, addiction. I think they're battles you've fought openly. So how do we change the conversation around those things, particularly ex-cons and mental wellness?
Well, I think first things first, I wish from the time I was in prison to the time now that I had a therapist the whole time. Number one, I understand why people stay away from therapists in prison. Number one is they can ruin your life. One misspoken thing, one misdiagnosed conversation can literally change your entire life and landscape, with not only within prison, but after prison. So I get why we don't have therapists in prison. We have psychs, and the rules are you go see a psych, you don't tell them you're depressed. You don't tell them you want to hurt yourself. You don't tell them you want to hurt others. They tell you before you all the other.
Those are rules that the inmates or the.
Oh yeah, they tell you right off the bat. They're like,
that's
if
crazy.
you do, they'll lock you up in the crazy ward, which is true. They will, until they can figure out that you've proven yourself enough to get back to the regular tiers. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two is upon exit, it should be required that we see therapy or therapists or psychologists because of what we just went through.
Yes.
Right? That isolation, the feeling, the depression. So all of that. Then you add on just like normal life, right? Things happen. People die. You may be able to have work and have happiness and then lose your job, right?
Yeah.
Your world crushes down on you. What do you do? How do you handle it? I didn't have the tools to do that. Everything I did was my own compression pot, right? And what happens with a compression pot is that the more and more you put that pressure, eventually it's going to explode. And unfortunately, and fortunately, I've probably exploded far too many times in different ways, self-harm ways in sense of that. And then like the PTSD part's very real. I used to have a recurring nightmare in which in the nightmare, I would vividly feel trapped. Wasn't necessarily in a prison cell. It could be in a box, could be in a room, could be any place with four walls that I felt were closing in on me. Or I used to have another one that I was going back to prison and I was in prison and I knew I was over my time, but no one would care. And there was no way to prove it.
Oh my, wow.
And I would
That's
wake
crazy.
up in cold sweats, heart pounding, like,
Whoa.
because like, what's worse than that? Can you imagine just being in prison and not knowing when your end date is and people ignoring you and you're being like, no, knock, knock. I know I'm supposed to be out.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's scary. So that's post, traumatic for me. It's stress disorder, right?
Yeah.
Always had anxiety, undiagnosed. It's part of like, even now I'm sitting here, I talk with my hands, I itch my face, I fix my hair. It's like, I'm jittery, right? And
yeah.
I work very hard to meditate and go through calmness. But, if I have the 1.5 cups of coffee or maybe a stronger brew that I anticipated, I can be,
I just got to jump in and give you some love here. First of all, thanks for being transparent, man. The conversation you're having needs to be had, and I think the world's changing. The perspective you bring in your book, and now if somebody's come out of prison about mental health, to me is remarkable. I think there's so much good you're doing talking about it. On the PTSD thing, I was just thinking about that from reading your book. Like what I read in your book is like, how do you unsee that? And I think I've told you in emails, and I talk about it now openly. I've been diagnosed myself with complex PTSD because of childhood and some things that happened. I didn't realize that like soldiers come back from war, and you hear about this a lot, but they're just thoughts the brain didn't chemically wash and put away deep in its corners that play back today as if it's occurring. And thinking about what you were saying, I was thinking even far as relationships you're in, being with somebody and they're experiencing a guy who relives things like that. So I assume that you're in some type of a program, you're getting some support for that, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been seeing a therapist pretty regularly for the past 3 years, and I saw that one in the first attempt during COVID.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting journey. I've also, truthfully seen a psychiatrist to actually, get to the root to diagnose myself in these.
Sure.
I also have a bit of OCD. And that usually came in the form of cleaning.
Yeah.
Everything had to be clean. It's like, if you ever watched Misery with Kathy Bates.
Oh yeah. One of my favorites.
I know which way the penguin's pointing.
Really?
Yeah, it's that bad. And I have a partially photographic memory. So it's even, so I see these images, and to your point of like, how do you ever forget? You don't. So like every image that I relay in the book and discuss, part of the reason I can write this book so vividly, as you've stated and others have, which is probably my highest compliment, right, as a writer, to make people feel as if they're there with me, is because of that memory and because of the way my mind looks at things and takes these inner photos and is able to see the world and see experiences.
Yeah, I think there's a term, I call it Maven. Maven is somebody who, when you want to know something about a topic, you go to that guy. I think because of the combination of, like, I believe that God, if you believe in God, it doesn't matter which God. If not, it's okay too. But God puts us in places to learn things, then uses us. That combination of your experience in the prison and then mental illness, and now you've emerged from it. There are millions of people out there who need you. Right, who need to hear from you. I want to throw this out at you that when I went through CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, it's like learning skills for your brain. It was the first time they taught me how to define anxiety in an equation. I just thought I'd throw this out just for fun. But, if I drew it on a picture for you, the anxiety equals like a fraction, top numerator, the belief that bad things will happen, denominator, the belief that I can cope with bad things happening. And what they taught us to do is when anxiety starts going up, basically you focus on changing that fraction. So you focus on working on coping or working on staying present in the moment with meditation things so you don't worry about bad things happening. And I think, like, honestly, man, even coming from where I come from in business, I think everybody has, it's a normal human behavior, anxiety. We get anxious. It's when the sympathetic nervous system, which is I call it the smoke alarm in the brain, comes on looking for danger all the time. Mine's like that because of my childhood trauma. That thing stays on. And I look at every situation that in my life, every minute of the day, looking first for danger, which is what my brain's programmed. But then that should go away and then I should experience relief, but that stays on. And so I have to work at keeping that off. So I want to say thanks for sharing what your insights and what you're doing there. I want to go back to I call this second chances and system change. So your story proves transformation is possible, yet recidivism rates remain high, as you said. What would you change tomorrow if you had the power? Or you probably have the power now to make a difference.
Okay, so clarifying, change in myself and my path forward, or change in the grander scheme of things?
The grander scheme of things.
I would start with trying to rework the way in which we treat prisons, halfway houses. I don't believe prisons should be privatized. I think that we have enough of a capitalistic market that we can make plenty of money on. I don't think human beings as widgets should be them. I think that, separating crimes and level of crimes instead of basking it, look, if you go to a county jail right now, any county jail, you would have a deadbeat dad who didn't pay his child support and a murderer in the same room. So
crazy.
You tell me how that's rational.
It's not.
It's not, because look, maybe the deadbeat dad is a deadbeat dad, and I'm not saying he's not, and there's a whole nother topic of conversation for that. But maybe he's just struggling and he can't afford, or maybe he lost his job and he's hiding and he can't pay because he doesn't have a job and the court doesn't care. No different than we have these rules about childbearing and the way you treat your children in society. Caseworker, if someone calls and says, "Oh, I saw my neighbor," a caseworker could show up at your door and take your child. That doesn't make sense to me. So I think that from a bureaucratic level, we need to fix things. That's why if you look at the prison reform movement, Kraft, Meek Mill, Jay-Z, that is something that Kim Kardashian's been a huge proponent of it. I think that these things are incredibly important to gain some real powerful lobbyists, i.e. celebrities or money, billionaires around, because once you start to delve in, it's like an onion. It's just going to be a very ugly onion. It's going to be like an uncooked onion, and it's not all edible. And I think the issue, right? And I think the issue is that we lump it all together. Let's separate it. To your point about your father, right? That's a potential manslaughter charge, right? Yeah. If you were to kill him. Now, do I think that level of manslaughter is the same as other levels of manslaughter where you kill someone in passion? Or no, they're different, very different. You have one that's an addict abusing a substance that gets behind something that we drive every day, some kind of operated vehicle, motorcycle, bike, and kills themselves or others. That obviously is a very serious matter and should be punished accordingly. But is that the same as intentionally going out and harming someone? No. Very different.
Yeah, very different. I go, as I hear you talk, I think about children. So one of the things I'm really a big proponent of is understanding the root causes of things, which is, to me, childhood is a lot of the answers. So I think about my own dad. My dad passed in 18, but just a few little nuggets. I learned over time, just years researching him, because I didn't know all this because he left home when I was 12, that he was born in a place called Suva, Fiji, pushed off a bridge. That's how he learned to swim. Went into the military, used to fly helicopters, but tough commanding officer, military, kick your ass if you don't do this. His father died of alcoholism. And then just recently I found out that my dad's father's father came from India on a ship in an indentured slavery program. That was something that was covered up. And I'm doing research on this now. There's a film, actually, I'll send you some info about that. We're trying to bring here to premiere that was just made on it. So I'm thinking now, okay, generational trauma, my dad, the way he was treated, and my dad being an innocent boy, grew up with all this stress and whatnot. And he just went out in life and did the best he could and relied on alcohol to numb what was going on in his head. That's really, so I've met so many fascinating people like you, and it always keeps coming up about this thread. So last thing I want to share with you is I started researching this, and there's something I found at a U.S. university called the circle of security. It's like a model, and it's like a circle, and it illustrates what children need growing up. And the things, there's little bubbles on this circle, like rounds. Nurturing, they want to explore their freedom of expression. They want you to be there to hug them and love them. And man, when I look at that, I go, didn't have. And then when I talk about all these other guys I've met, like you, they find gaps in that circle of security. You know, like if your dad goes to war, okay, it's not his fault, but he's left you, right? Yeah. So what can we do to teach adults now to be better parents? And what can we do in the world to teach children growing up how to understand how their brains developed, and this whole thing about being better parents? I really believe in that.
Well, I don't like to speak on things I don't have experience in the sense of,
go for it.
Who am I to say how to raise a child? I don't have a child. I have thoughts on it. I think, you set a good example and you're a role model. And to your point, you show weakness, you show love, you hug them. My father and I still to this day say, I love you after every phone call. And
that's awesome.
And he's 82 years old. So nice. I'm a 46-year-old man. So I have no shame in that. I also think that as far as children, I think what we should be doing is protecting them from the nonsense. And like, especially now, like you said, and I said, we were both bullied, right? Could you imagine if we existed today in the way that social media follows you home and makes that level of bullying exponentially worse and inescapable? And the fact that we have not done anything about this as a society, and we allow our children to go through this in the name of what? In the name of, is it really even capitalism at that point? I mean, it seems like to me more like brainwashing, right?
Yeah.
Because we as adults already spend too much time on our phones. We have now caught up to the kids in the sense of like how accessible and it's become a societal issue. And I think it's really destroying the fabric of society and making our children, I think you could probably, unfortunately, correlate it with the amount of gun violence in the United States, senseless gun violence.
Really? Yeah.
I would believe if you looked at the statistics, over a 10, 20, 30-year period, there would probably be a rise in it around the growth of social media and what social media has become to our society. And I think that we really need to do something about that and to help these kids find their own way, because their minds are impressionable. You can't rent a car until you're 25 years old for a reason. Your mind
that's right.
Okay.
But you can steal one.
You can. Yeah.
Oh, you would probably know the mistake you wouldn't make. Oh man. So again, I have just one more question. Then we got some things to award you with. So thank you for being so long on the show. You just so my brain's going on this journey from everything you said. First of all, I would hire you, nominate you for high office because of what you said. I don't care if you don't have children. You have wisdom. And I think one of your presidents, Reagan, the past said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall or something. This social media wall, man, has to come down. What you said really got me emotional in a way that when I was a kid being picked on in the schoolyard, it's like, okay, be bullied in the schoolyard, then it's done with. I go home. It just sits in my brain. Oh, let's now take that and amplify it with social media so I can unsee it and tell everybody, so I can't even go out in society because I'm thinking everybody thinks I'm not good enough. Man, that's crazy.
And I'll jump on that quickly just to say, like, when I was in a position of power and had all these, crew members, I would inflict violence on people for anything because of my ego and all those past. So can you imagine it was inescapable and you had one opportunity? It's sad. It's really sad.
I hear you. Well, I think you're obviously making a difference in lives now. Well, I know we can collaborate on some things going forward on stuff like that. I just have one question. I call it the Met, so we didn't get into the sector as much. It's in the book too, the creative work. I put down here the Collective NY as Sanctuary. So you co-founded this theater company with Amy Schumer, I think, and others. What sacred space were you trying to create that didn't exist?
Well, we all graduated school together during the writer's strike of 2007, so there was no work. So all young or relatively young ideologues trying to jump out into the acting and theater world of film, television, and as soon as get an agent, which was a big thing back then. Oh my God, you got an agent! Oh my God, you get a SAG card! All these things, very different now. But back then, they all had a very high stakes and a real potential, and just decided, you know what, we got ideas. We want to make stuff. We're and that's what we did, and we started, and we had a great run. I mean, we've since reworked the company. It's down to just 3 of us now to move forward into the next generation of what it will be. But the experiences were definitely great. A lot of live theater, comedy shows. Some of the most
comedy
people working right now have either done our comedy nights or performed on our small stages of off Broadway over the years. And it's very rewarding and fulfilling. And there's something beautiful in being able to offer that to people. And
totally. Well, God bless you for that. I love the comedy aspect, going back to mental health. My wife was born just outside of Rome. We've been married many years, coming up 30. Anna, and she is like, her personality, she's always giggling and laughing, and she's bubbly. I'm too serious. But we'll watch a movie together, a crime drama, and a guy gets shot in the head, and she's snickering, and I'm like, how can you do that? But we have season tickets to all the Broadway shows and things, and I just, it fills me up, the comedy piece. I just hope people laugh more, they hug more, everything you're talking about. Let's have you hold up the book one more time, then we're going to honor you with a book review. Hold that up there. All right, there it is. Try Again. We're with Nick Marshall, the author of that great book. So everyone, I will just say that I've read and I listened to the audiobook, and I recommend it highly. So now we're going to reveal a international book review. You ready for that? I'm going to do it in a way where I put it on screen. So you might just have me distracted from it. Let me set this up, okay? I'm going to add this to the screen there. Can you see that? It says Nick Marshall review. Yeah. Okay. I just got to go to another screen, figure out how I can change the screen. Okay. So let's just set this up here. Here we are with Nick Marshall, the author of the book, Try Again. And I'm revealing the first international review from Canada, or at least the one international review from Canada that I've written after reading the book and listening to the audio. So just sit back, Nick, and take this in. This is your time to shine, man. I want you to enjoy this. We can repurpose this clip in the show as well for you to use for marketing the book. All right, so I'm just going to bring your attention to the screen, everybody. So Nick Marshall book review. This was posted May 31st, 2025, both on Audible for the audiobook and Amazon, and they've both accepted it. It's up there live. So let me just change screen here. Amazon review, 5 stars. Verified purchase, meaning when you do a book review, if you can buy the book, everyone, then they tag it as a verified purchase, which helps the author. That way it shows its integrity. I actually read the book. The title of my review, A Raw, Unflinching Journey from Rock Bottom to Redemption. This book will change how you see second chances. So here we go. Nick Marshall's Try Again isn't just a memoir, it's a masterclass in human resilience that will leave you breathless. From the opening scene in St. Tropez's glittering excess to the brutal reality of Bergen County Jail, Marshall crafts a narrative so visceral and honest that you can't look away. What I loved, the writing is cinematic, unflinching. Marshall doesn't ask for sympathy. He earns your respect through brutal honesty about his mistakes and the systemic challenges that follow former inmates. His journey from armed robbery to the heights of New York City nightlife, managing celebrities like DiCaprio, Rihanna, reads like a fever dream, but it's all devastatingly real. What others will learn, this book shatters every stereotype about ex-cons. You'll discover how the prison system actually works. Spoiler, it doesn't. The hidden world of elite nightlife, and most importantly, that redemption is possible when society has written you off. Marshall's insights into mental health addiction and the crushing weight of debt will resonate with anyone who's ever felt trapped by their circumstances. The scene where he realizes he's become a nobody in the nightlife world he once dominated, that's a feeling many of us know too well. Format and value of the book. Nearly 300 pages, this memoir moves like a thriller. Each chapter builds a momentum from claustrophobic prison scenes to the intoxicating world of celebrity culture. The dialogue crackles with authenticity. Marshall's eye for detail makes every scene come alive. This isn't just an entertainment, it's education, resilience, second chances, and the American dream deferred but not defeated. My personal connection is someone who has faced my own professional setbacks. Marshall's ability to rebuild repeatedly struck a deep chord with me. His relationship with hope, literally and metaphorically, reminds us that even in our darkest moments, something inside us fights to survive. The scene where he realizes he's become a nobody in the nightlife world he once dominated, that's a feeling many of us know too well. So here's my call to action. Read this book, then tell everyone you know that you read it. If you've ever failed, fallen, or felt forgotten, Marshall's story will remind you that your past doesn't dictate your future. If you think you understand the criminal justice system or addiction or what it really takes to rebuild a life, think again. This book will change your perspective on second chances and the extraordinary courage it takes to keep trying. And please, leave your review. Books like this need to be heard, especially now when so many people need hope. And congratulations.
Thanks, Tom. That's beautiful. Wow.
So
well,
you're
review.
You're welcome. You can share that with your publisher. I'm sure they'll get a kick. So I'm going to send you that link to that presentation so you can have that. And if you go to your Amazon and also to the audiobook, it's actually there. So, you can tell that of them. So let's now honor you with an award, and then we'll let you have the last word. So have you ever heard of challenge coins? I think you might have, maybe. No. Okay, well, next time.
If you're talking from an AA perspective?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Okay. All right, good. So next time I ask you that, you go, yeah, I did, Tom, from you. I heard of that.
Thank you. I've heard of them.
Okay. So when I started the show, I purposely created the narrative of Hero's Journey to get just the 1% in society to come to the show. Not everybody makes it. I vet hard, as you know. People who have taken something and turned it into a purpose to go and change the world. And something that's hard, which you've done. Challenge coins, there's a little sleeve that just going to put this other camera up here. So hold on a sec. That's all right. I haven't got it, so I'll just show you here. Comes with a little explanation. They were started in World War I era. The practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the Army Special Forces. Carrying the coin at times, presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with that unit resulted in a number of consequences for those who couldn't produce it. The most popular required the coinless soldier to buy a round of drinks, and that still occurs today, apparently. So I'm just going to hold it up here on this camera. They're hand painted and crafted. The front of it is the emblem of the show. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry there.
It's pretty cool.
And then the back of it is actually the hero's journey narrative, fully illustrated based on Joseph Campbell's research. Mm-hmm. And I'm biased, but they're hefty and they're beautiful. So congratulations and welcome to the Quiet Warrior community, man.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. My desire would be to meet you in person and give it to you, but I'll be sending it to you. Ask you to take a picture somewhere meaningful because I like putting together a bit of a wall at future. So last word from you. I'll call this the unwritten chapter. What's next? So I'll call this a book unwritten. If you could write one book that would change how America treats its formerly incarcerated, what would its central message be?
Hope in the face of struggle.
Ooh, I love that. Could be a title for another book. That's
just giving people the opportunity to learn from their mistakes instead of allowing their mistakes to define them.
That's beautiful, man. That's so well said. What's next for you? What are you working on? And then tell us where we can get a hold of you and everything else.
Working on fundraising for a movie. Just had another call today about trying to bring another management company on with the agency we're currently working with to grab some more talent or to get our first official talent on board. We've been circling some things, and it's quite a bit of a cart before the horse, but working on that. And then some other, trying to get out a series, I think I'm going to start writing, working on the prequel to this book, the one that actually, as you know, in the beginning, I allude to, that got me this deal. So I think I'll work harder on that to go out to market with that next year, 26, hopefully.
Oh, you heard it here. Yeah, we heard it here. And where can we get a hold of your stuff? I think you have a website or something, right?
I don't have a website, but Instagram, the Nick Marshall. I answer DMs if I go through the blocked ones as well. So definitely like just try and stay engaged and answer any questions and be there for people saying nice things or
That's a good thing. Being Nick Marshall, is that what you said?
Oh, the THE Nick Marshall. So it's just Nick my name with a the before it. It was a kind of a joke because my friend made me join Instagram late, and I was so adamantly against social media. This is probably like 12 years ago now, that I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to be the Nick Marshall. So everyone knows me. And it was just like some silly nonsense that actually stuck. So
yeah, that's very cool. I'll hook up with you there. I definitely will do that. And congratulations. The next book, if you're looking to get early praise or any way I can help you reading a manuscript to give you feedback, we're now connected for life as Quiet Warriors. That's awesome.
And if I'm in the Vancouver area, I'll definitely look you up. And if you're in New York, do the same.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we're for sure. So I'll get offline with you the address so I can get the award out to you. But I just want to say to the audience here, it's been a treasure having Nick Marshall with us today. And find that true passion and purpose like you hear from Nick, everyone, and live the life that you deserve and desire. We'll see you next week back again on the Quiet Warrior Show. And Nick, you're welcome anytime. Love you, man.
Cool, man. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
All right, just going to take it offline here. We're still on,